Americans for Fair Taxation presents the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation, and recorded by Bob Paxton, a volunteer with the Florida FAIRtax Educational Association. And now, this week's Chairman's Report.
Hello, I'm Bob Paxton with the AFFT Chairman's Report for Friday, March 13th, 2020. The FAIRtax and the coronavirus. Now, at first glance, the above title doesn't make any sense. The FAIRtax is a plan to replace all federal income and payroll taxes with a 23% sales tax on new retail goods and services. The coronavirus is a viral strain that is creating havoc in the stock market and materially affecting business production in many countries around the world. Many companies in China are affected and are not able to supply companies in the United States and other parts of the world with products made or assembled in China. A growing number of schools and colleges are closing their campuses and moving to online delivery, even for first and second graders. Many sporting events are not allowing fans to attend, but are playing their games in front of empty bleachers. Now, many companies are facing the tough choice of either keeping their offices opened and requiring employees to come to work, or sending them home, with many of them having no income available from paid leave. Now, if the business stays open and someone becomes infected and infects others, is the business liable? If the business sends valuable employees home, should they pay them? Well, what if the business can't afford to pay them if they're not working? Well, should people be concerned for their health and their livelihoods? Well, of course. The overwhelming percentage of deaths from the coronavirus appear to be from the most elderly who got the virus and to people with other medical problems. However, there have been some deaths of younger people who did not have other medical problems but apparently had a weakened immune system. Let's look at the plans to help from the government. Both Democrats and Republicans are rushing to find ways to provide help to Americans who are going to be affected by the coronavirus. This includes not only providing medical help when they can, but also trying to soften the economic impact on our citizens. The president is proposing a holiday where the 14.4% Social Security payroll tax would be suspended. This would give workers an immediate 7.2% raise and allow businesses to keep 7.2% of the workers' wages in their businesses. The president is also looking at making this suspension permanent and funding Social Security from the general fund. The problem is that the president is not talking about raising other taxes to offset the loss of revenue. Therefore, the president's plan would rapidly accelerate the impending insolvency of Social Security. Others are proposing that the federal government provide sick pay to workers who don't have a sick pay plan with their employers, and still others want to combine this with increased amounts of unemployment insurance. Now, all of these measures may be necessary in order to prevent an economic meltdown, but where's the money going to come from to fund these plans? Well, if past history is any indication, the government will just print more money and further increase the national debt. Let's look at what would happen if the FAIRtax were law. Under the FAIRtax, if you want to get money to people in an emergency like we're facing now, the government could easily increase the amount of the prebate that is sent monthly to every household, and it could also reduce the FAIRtax rate. Addressing this problem with the FAIRtax would be much easier than having countless bureaucrats process these other programs, which, if they're like other temporary government programs in the past, will never go away. Once the crisis has passed, returning to normalcy is quite simple with a FAIRtax. You just reduce the prebate amount back to what it was and/or increase the FAIRtax rate back to what it was. Now, will this increase the deficit? Well, yes, but each of you will know exactly how much. We can easily look at the national debt and calculate on a napkin how much of a FAIRtax increase would be needed to pay for any temporary stimulus after the crisis is passed. We can easily calculate how much of an increase would be needed to balance the budget and pay off the national debt. Now, would this FAIRtax solution help some wealthy people who don't need the help? Well, yes, but if it helps 10% of the population who don't need the help and 90% who do, well, 90 to 10 is a really good ratio. What good does a reduced payroll tax do for a worker who doesn't have a job? How long will it take to get people on unemployment insurance? And how will the person who's been quarantined even apply? If you want to get money to Americans today, then the fair tax would be a lot easier, more efficient, and more effective than any of the proposals currently being made. In conclusion, no sane person would want the government to stand idly by and watch this coronavirus epidemic leave millions of Americans unable to provide even the most basic elements of survival for themselves. Now, for way too long, Americans have ignored an essential task: confront and take responsibility for the way their federal government spends our money. Now, nearly all of us live on a budget. Why not require the federal government to have a budget as well? But instead of it being numbers that make everyone's eyes glaze over, why not have a system where we can all understand exactly how each dollar of federal spending impacts us? This is easy with a fair tax, but impossible with the present corrupt income payroll tax system. Early native Alaskans used to be plagued by wolves coming around to steal meat from the seals and other fish and animals that they killed for food. The solution they devised was to take the very long, sharp knives they used and dip them in the blood of the animals they killed. Because of the cold, the blood would quickly freeze on the knife. They kept dipping the knives into the blood and letting it freeze until they had a blood popsicle. Then they would plant the hilt of the knives in the ice at some distance from their igloos at night. The wolves would come around and eagerly start licking the blood until the edge of the knife was exposed, and eventually they would cut the lingual artery in their tongue. The wolves would continue to lap up the warm blood until they dropped dead from blood loss. So in the morning, the natives would find the dead wolves. It's time for Americans to wake up and insist on the fair tax now so we can be aware of federal spending and not suffer the same fate as the Alaskan wolves. It's time to take back control of our income and our lives and demand a sane tax system to fund the federal government. Demand that Congress pass the fair tax, the only truly fair tax.
This has been the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation. Check back every week for news and information about the fair tax and learn why the fair tax should replace our antiquated federal income tax system. If you'd like to receive a copy of the Chairman's Report in your inbox every week, sign up at FAIRtax.org.